begin with a word to the wise. When you come out of this pandemic and you find yourself on stage for the very first time in front of a live audience in a physical event, that is not the right day to break out your high heels. Just try a little bit before. The past year has been extraordinary and incredible and tragic in so many different ways. And when I was asked to prepare the talk for the event here today, I thought I would talk a little bit about the major disruptions in our history and what they teach us about the future that's coming on the other side of this pandemic. But I had a little bit of trouble coming up with the right word to describe this disruption. Mainly because I hate what we've done to the word disruption. If I asked you all today what comes to your mind when you hear the word disruption, you'd probably say a new app, a new feature, and a new device. That's what disruption has come to mean. But when I talk about the events in history that tell us something about the future that's on the other side of this pandemic, I'm not even talking about man taking his first step on the moon. I'm talking about the asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs. You know, the scale of the crisis that we have seen in the last 2 years is more akin to the discovery of fire. It's akin to the Spanish flu that infected 1 in every 3 people and killed 15 million. It's more akin to the advent of the nuclear age, which didn't just change the way we conducted warfare, it really changed the entire rules of the game. Because now you couldn't just resolve and make laws about war, keeping in mind 2 armies that had guns poised at each other and everything was very physical and tactical. Suddenly you introduced mass destruction. Chemical weapons did the same, biological weapons did the same. I'm talking about the Industrial Revolution. The steam engine didn't just give us another way to conduct supply chain work and another way to do production. It completely changed society. It introduced new wealth. It created the middle class. And then it also gave us the problems of the factory system and the exploitation of workers, which eventually gave us labor unions. That's a disruptive event. I'm talking about the advent of artificial intelligence, about agriculture, about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that determined for the first time ever, all the countries came together and signed a document that said every single human being, irrespective of their identity and background, had infallible human rights, that it was all our responsibilities to defend. And so because we now use the word disruption for small technical features in the devices we use every day in our mobile phones, I was looking for a word that was a little bit heavier, that was a little bit more, that had more gravitas, that could explain what was going on. And so I turned to astrophysics. And I came up with the phrase, the event horizon. And I know a lot of you here are probably already familiar with what an event horizon is. If you're not, you're probably familiar with what a black hole is. So essentially, and I'm not an astrophysicist, but I'll do my best to explain this. An event horizon is that point when a body is accelerating towards any kind of a body with infinite density and mass like a black hole. When it is accelerating towards it, eventually reaches a point from where it can't return. Because, and if I've got this correctly, it would then need to be moving at a speed that was more than the speed of light. And Einstein said nothing moves faster than the speed of light. That point is called the event horizon. It is at that point that the object can't return, but it is also at that threshold where we can no longer see the future. We don't know what's going to happen to that body once it reaches the event horizon. To me, the COVID-19 pandemic is not a disruption. It's not a small glitch in our history. It's an event horizon that's going to completely change the rules of the game as we know it. It's going to be the point beyond which we currently can't see, but fortunately for us, there is a world beyond this point that we are going to create, that you are going to create using the faculties of your imagination. Just like in a good science fiction movie, you need the imagination to tell you what actually lies behind the event horizon of a black hole. The reason that I think this pandemic has been an event horizon for us is not just because of the massive losses we've experienced. Yes, I know that 4 million people's lives have been lost, and all of you anywhere in the world would know at least one person in your immediate circle who has been personally touched and impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. But it's also important and historical and the point of no return because in a very egregious way, it showed us the fractures of the world that already existed before we even had the pandemic. So when the pandemic struck, the reason that 225 million equivalent jobs were lost around the world was because 4 billion people around the world don't have any social protections. While 2,500 billionaires had an increase in their income of over $5.2 billion a day, according to some estimates. 120 million more people are likely to sink into poverty because of the socio-economic impacts of this pandemic. 170 million children around the world have not attended physical school in almost over a year. And I know that online learning has opened up new avenues and vistas for us, but we also know the digital divide exists. And we know that there are children who, without a stable internet connection and without devices, have actually not received a quality education over the last year. We are experiencing the worst economic recession in over a century. And meanwhile, stock markets have surged, and civil wars, wherever they were raging, have gone on as business as usual. So this is the event horizon from which we can't return because we can't afford future shocks, and are the most fundamental building blocks of our society that I have seen up close in my work, which is development, peace building, the way we define health and well-being for people and for communities, and our purpose and our careers and how we think about the future of our lives is going to change in an irreversible way. Fortunately, as I said, for us, it's not just that this is a threshold beyond which we can't see. This is a threshold beyond which you personally as an individual have to create the new world that's coming. And I'm going to deep dive a little bit very briefly into 4 big areas where I think, from the experience of my work, where these big changes are going to come. The first of these is, of course, peace building. Now, what this pandemic showed us was that we had the opportunity to operationalize our solidarity across countries of the world, across people, that we were able to come together in the face of an emergency and take concrete actions when crisis struck the most vulnerable. Can we do the same thing to build new systems of peace building? So, for example, pandemic control became quite a democratic exercise, isn't it? All of us, even though we were vaccinated, even though we might not have been in the most vulnerable category, although we know COVID impacts everybody, we all still have to wear a mask. We all still have to get vaccinated because we have to protect those who are the most vulnerable, the elderly, the immunocompromised among us. In the same way, can we take that lesson and make peace building something that is devolved to communities and neighborhoods and individuals? So it's not just generals sitting at a table and negotiating a peace agreement anymore. It's actually you as an individual not fanning the flames of hate speech. It's you, and let's take a very concrete example. The next time, a friend or an uncle in your family chat sends a message that seems a bit off, you respectfully pick a fight. That's what peace building should mean. This pandemic reinforced our belief in global governance, the fact that we have these international laws and institutions that we need to reinforce for the betterment of everyone. Secondly, development needs to change. Now, I know we all have a certain definition of development, but this is what I want you to take away from this pandemic. It is that economies are built on people and not on indices and indicators. One thing that was revealed to us, as I said, 4 billion people didn't have any social protections. When we said hand washing was a pandemic control strategy, that you should, do the simple practice of washing your hands with soap and water would protect everyone from the pandemic, we realized that 3 billion people around the world did not have simple hygiene facilities. When we asked people to shelter in place, we realized that billions of people around the world didn't have toilets or running water at home. And we realized that a lot of women who were being asked to shelter at home actually saw a spike in domestic abuse and domestic violence. Is this the kind of world we want to take into the next shock? Because the next shock is coming. Our development needs to be ground up. It needs to be about equity. It needs to be about resilience against future catastrophic risks. Climate change is around the corner. The 6th IPCC assessment report just a few weeks ago told us that if we continue to do business as usual, we are on track for a 1.5 degrees increase in temperature within our lifetimes in the next few decades. The next virus might cause an even worse pandemic. An extreme weather event might happen. We've also realized through COVID that these shocks are now shared. They are not the kind of problems that impact a certain kind of country or that impact a certain class of people. They impact everyone. So those who are the poorest and most vulnerable among us will not have the tools to cope next time, and it will impact everybody. Millionaires, billionaires, everyone is going to be impacted equally by a big crisis like climate change, and that's what we need to do. Number 3, well-being. And there is a reason why I don't use the word health, I use well-being, although I'm talking about the same sort of kinds of activities. It's because just like after the Spanish flu, we started thinking about epidemiology more, and people started being more interested in what doctors were doing and how vaccines were working. I think what COVID-19 has taught us is that health needs to be about so much more than treatment infrastructure. It has to be about mental health and psychosocial support for the most vulnerable. It has to be about access to hygiene facilities and water. It has to be about access to accurate information, so you don't have people who genuinely believe that vaccines come fitted with microchips that will go into your bloodstream so the alien overlords can control you. That's what health needs to mean. We need to invest more in innovation, because the world came together and gave us so rapidly good vaccines, and a number of them that got emergency use authorization, and millions of people got vaccinated so quickly. This has never happened in the history of the world. That's what we should take ahead from this. And finally, what we do with our work, our career, and what we think of as purpose. Now, I don't want to overplay the work from home card, because some of the functions that constitute really the backbone of our society, like agriculture, you can't do them working from home. But there are lessons that officers have learned. Our 9 to 5 and the way we think about our careers and what we want to do after we finished university and finished school is going to change fundamentally, because now we know that we can link to people across the world. We can coordinate better, we can collaborate better. We don't have to do the commute if we choose not to. We can save the environment by reducing the physical and carbon footprint of the way we do work. All that is going to change, and given that future shocks are ahead of us, we also need to start thinking about the impact our work has, not just on the bottom line, but the people that we work with. What a disappointment it would be if this generation that could harness renewable energy to power industries, the light of the sun literally, that could jump portals online into other countries in the blink of an eye, that can create artificial and virtual realities, didn't take advantage of this moment beyond this event horizon to create a new world, because the event horizon is here, whether we like it or not. Fortunately for us, what's coming on the other side is entirely up to us. Thank you very much.